Oh, yeah. Transportation was shocking because the surgeons and the food surgeons and how are you? Good. I thought
Lord, as this winter starts to set in and the roads start to be a little bit more difficult to travel, be with all of us as we look out after each other and have us a blessed holiday season. Amen.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay. So we're missing Dan, RJ.
anybody hear from Dan that is available to make it or not?
No.
So you may show up here in a minute. Who knows?
Move to excuse Councilmember Dunn.
Second.
Second. Further discussion on here, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, the agenda's before you.
Move the agenda.
Second.
And second discussion on hearing, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Okay. Workshop discussion. Okay, here we are.
Okay, so good evening, Katie Allen from Liberty Lake and Larry Larson from Washout. We've been working on this for many, many hours, and our goal tonight was to go over the terms and conditions that we've agreed to at a staff level. Larry needs to get the document, I'm sorry, I don't have your microphone on. Larry needs to have the Attorney General review the agreement, and that is still underway. For the most part, the terms and conditions that we're going to cover tonight are all agreed to. The recitals are a little bit confusing, and so he's rewriting them, and then once it's done, it's going to come back to you for your review and decision. So we're not going to. So number 7 is no action tonight. We're not going to be asking you to approve the agreement. It's not ready yet. The agreement's not ready tonight. So by way of background, what we wanted to do was make sure that we've answered all of your questions. So I'm going to take a brief introduction, go through this fairly quickly. You've seen it before. And then RJ is going to do some what-if scenarios. And then I want to go one by one and make sure that individually you all have your questions asked and answered. Okay, so the Harvard Road paving, widening, and westbound on-ramp. So as all of you know, we completed the paving and striping last Friday. So that project is done. The widening and westbound on-ramp, I got an update from Scott today. The 100% documents will be done the second week of December, and we then turn those over to WashDOT, who then will take them to add sometime in the spring. If things go well, and we stay on course, then the construction of the widening and the on-ramp would be the summer, fall of 2020. That would be the beginning, and how long the project lasts, I don't want to give you a schedule now, it's a little premature. The Henry Road overpass. So, we've completed our Spokane County easement. The update for the TIF and LIF project definition is complete. In fact, tonight you have a resolution asking you to approve the funding that would identify the Henry Road project for reimbursement from LIF, as well as the county's portion of the 1.5. Okay? The WashDOT agreement, as I said, the Attorney General's office is reviewing it, and when it's ready to come back to you for your vote, we don't have a date yet because we don't have it back from the Attorney General's office yet. The right-of-way appraisal was, I received the first appraisal today. It came in at $1.2 million. And we have used that number for purposes of demonstration. However, that number may change. It's just an estimate at this time. WashDOT has to review it. We have to review it. I didn't get it till this afternoon. We have to review it. And then the second appraiser is starting his appraisal. So that is still underway, so that number is not a done deal yet. it'll be sometime in November before we get the appraisal complete. We don't have to have the appraisal complete in order to execute the agreement with WashDOT unless you want to, but it's not a condition of our WashDOT agreement to have the second appraisal. The design consultant selection, we've received 3 consultant proposals, and right now those interviews are scheduled, I think, for December 3rd, and so it should be coming back to you for approval of the design consultant. And just so that you know, WashDOT and the City of Liberty Lake are participating in the selection of the consultant. The Spokane County Maintenance Agreement I haven't started on. The WashDOT Maintenance Agreement I have not started on. The design should be underway in 2020, which is only a few months away. And construction, if all goes well, is 2021, 22. What I wanted to say is, in my conversations with Mike Gribner from WashDOT, our goal is to keep this project moving. We don't want to stop. We want to keep it moving. We know 976 may be an issue, but we still want to keep this project moving at this time. So Audrey, I'll go to the next slide. So there, do you want to do the next slide?
Sure.
Sure,
See what it
okay. So this is the terms and condition of the agreement, so. I'm putting him on the spot, he didn't know I was going to turn him around.
Okay, so I proviso legislatively, DOT, or the City of Liberty Lake is responsible for $6 million to be contributed to the project.
Just a second, I want to just introduce you so
Yeah.
everybody in
I'm
the
sorry.
audience knows, okay?
Turn it so we can see. Yeah, well, I was saying, I wish the table was turned so we could see you talk instead of looking at your back.
Well, that's okay.
Okay, so,
You talk to the microphone, they'll
Yeah.
listen to you, and they'll know you're talking, but they know your face now.
all right, thank you. My name is Larry Larson. I'm the Assistant Regional Administrator for Development at the DOT for the Eastern Region. So back to this, it's a $26.9 million project total from a project from Barker, Henry, and then at Harvard. The City of Liberty Lake is responsible for $6 million, and we will credit engineering services and right-of-way against that $6 million as that comes due. That will happen during the Henry Road construction. That's where we will charge that, so to speak, or invoice that work. And that's a good spot to do that, because then we will know what the value of the land is, what the value of the engineering services. So we'll have a hard number at that point. For the work that happens in Liberty Lake, if there are overages, and if the DOT's portion it would exceed $20.9 million, then the City of Liberty Lake would be responsible for covering those overages for the part. In other words, if Barker goes over, you would not be responsible for that.
Can I add something, Larry? Real quick, not to interrupt you, but RJ is going to go through scenarios from a spreadsheet that Larry and RJ and I worked on. So you're going to see how these numbers play out based on various scenarios. So.
Okay, so as far as the services go, it's basically just putting forth a set of plans. It says design, visible documents, environmental, geotech survey, utilities, coordination, hydraulics, traffic management, and landscaping. There will be a landscaping part of this for $150,000 that we will have the City of Liberty Lake completely take care of. They'll design it, and that way that keeps us out of, because our standards for what we would do for landscaping would be different than what a local city would do, and so that you'll be in control of that. There is some additional right-of-way at the south end that we don't know what the design is yet on that, and so that we'll be figuring out. What we are responsible for is to review the work and make sure that the design work comes back in according to our requirements, so we can have a successful advertisement, award, and construction. We will manage the construction except for the landscaping that I just mentioned. Risk and unknowns, we don't know what the intersection will look like at Henry Road and Country Vista. Could be a roundabout, could be a signal, could be a stop sign. That's what the designers will get into. Utility coordination, we think we know the utilities, but again, that intersection especially is Grand Central Station for utilities, so we don't know exactly what that will be. and that's just what, as the design proceeds, we get into that. Budget confirmation, based on the design, and yes, number 4, I-976 is a big unknown for us. We don't know. Right now they're talking about it could be that it won't pass, but there's a lot of skeptical thought on that. What that does to our program overall, we simply don't know. That would be a legislative question. We know there'll be impacts, but we do not know how the legislature will react to that.
So with that, we're going to now have RJ. Let me begin by saying it's not just simple arithmetic how all the numbers come together. So RJ's worked closely with WashDOT to go through some scenarios so that you can have a degree of comfort in knowing about approximately what the $6 million minus credit looks like. So RJ?
Okay, so
Do we have a hard copy of this for us?
He's going to run different scenarios, but we can print them out for you.
Okay, very good.
yeah, if you want to see hard copies, you ask for what scenario you want to see, and I can run it. Print those off. So under this first scenario, what you're looking at here first is the $6 million is the City of Liberty Lake's contribution. That's in the draft. You're looking at the contract. That's where you can find where that recital says that $6 million. The assumptions that we made, I've made 3 assumptions on there. Barker and Harbor projects are on budget, and for this scenario, we should always assume Barker is going to be on budget because we're not responsible, and that's in one of the recitals. Barker's not included in the overages. So the scenarios on Barker don't matter. We're just going to assume Barker is always on budget. The valuation for Henry is $1.2 million, and then on this scenario, Henry Road budget, Henry Road is also on budget. So everything is coming in on site. In this section here, talks about the landscape improvements that Larry Larson mentioned, which is in the recital as well. You see the acquired real estate's in here for 1.2. Right now, the best estimate we have per the agreement for the design of Henry Road is 850. That's still to be determined, but for this scenario, it's 850. And then this 3.8 is the construction of Henry Road. That's what, if you add the math in here, that is what the city's portion would be going to the projects. Since all the projects together would still combine with this next one here, still all the projects that are built would be under the overall budget. There would actually be a savings. And because there's a savings, in the recital talks about the city shares in that savings. So where we're at 3.8, it actually gets reduced from that $3 million after all the projects are all done. So when you look at the cash summary portion, what we would pay out in this scenario to WashDOT is $3.1 million. We paid for design of $850, and the total cash out of pocket for the city is $3.9 million. For cash flow purposes, the resolution talks about us doing the design phase as one part and the construction as a second part. So we split up the tip lift reimbursement in 2 different phases. We do the design first, and we get reimbursed for that. And a year later, we do the construction, and then we get reimbursed for that. So it's not all one-time money going out. So to see how I'm going to show you, just peek at the WashDOT spreadsheet that we're working from. This includes all 3 projects in here. But for instance, let's say the just so you see how the numbers work. Let's say the WashDOT or the Henry Road comes in at 10% over budget. So that would be $9.5 million roughly, which is about 10% here. If you go back to this one-page summary, what you would notice is these numbers still stay the same. We're still 1.2 million of the right-of-way. We've still got the design of Henry at 850. Our construction piece is still the 3.8. That gets us down to the total $6 million if you took all these components together here. Because all the projects come under budget, there's a savings of $654,000 that the city would get, so that the cash going out is 3.2. We're still doing the design for 850 and it's 4.14. So you'll notice from the first scenario where everything's on budget, the total cash is about 3.9. In this case, it's 4.1. So if you take this in one step farther, let's go to maybe more of a worst case, how far you would have to go to where we start having overage. You get close to about 12.5 million here is with of construction going over. So the project would have to go almost 45% over budget. You get to this scenario here where it says overage. I have to cheat because this is such a complicated formula that I gotta get this number to come over and produce correctly. These first stages, this number doesn't change. It's still kind of the same assumptions, but when we get to the end of the day, our project has gone over budget. The cash paid to WashDOT is $4 million, still paid for design of $850, total cash is $4.8 million.
So can I paraphrase that scenario, is the construction would have to be 44% over budget, and we would owe $4.8 million towards the project. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay.
So now we're at 10. You're at 10.
10, no.
No, we were at
We
4.8.
pay 6.
So this first one is a summary of the credits and the construction and everything. $6 million is our total obligation to the project. The bottom portion is the cash numerator. They're complementary numbers. They're not added. You add this and this to it. So if you were to look at the total cash that we're spending, it's 4.85 in this scenario. If you add the 1.2 million of it, you get to 6,050,000. That's because in this scenario we went for an overage.
So just to paraphrase, the out-of-pocket to the city of Liberty Lake, if it was 44% over budget, the contribution would be $4.8 million, $4.85 million. And the resolution that you're passing, RJ, for the TIF and lift contribution is 5.15. So the TIF and lift, if you approve it, fully funds the total cash that the city of Liberty Lake would be obligated to commit to this project. Mike?
We have an estimate of 1.2 million for the appraisal. Where in here is the dollar amount, or maybe it'll show up later on, for the trip credits that we're giving to the landowners?
It's not a factor of this?
Pardon?
It's not factored into this.
But that does come into some of our hard costs, because that whenever we're getting there, I think it's important to realize if we're getting the land donated is worth 1.2, that is not really the cost. I mean, there is a cost associated with that in the trip valuations, correct? That's what we talked about?
At some point in the future.
At some point in the future, right? So
You're
I know
getting
that's
it.
been discussed, but I think it's important we take that into consideration when we come into some of those other costs down the road.
So what you're referring to is when we negotiated the transaction with the Centennial Properties,
Right.
they received 2,300 trip credit, and there was a window on it. Was it 2040, I believe?
Yeah.
2040, that they got credit up to 2,300 trips.
An evaluation to that?
In today's dollars is probably close to $2 million.
Right.
In today's dollars.
Yeah. So I just think that's important as we move forward.
Correct.
Citizens and council realize is that we're getting an evaluation of $1.2 million worth of land supposedly given to us, but we're giving back roughly $2 million in valuation.
Correct, and just for the thinking.
Which is revenue that would have come to the city.
So we will not receive that money in Harvard Road Mitigation Funds, realizing that Harvard Road Mitigation Funds, this project mitigates the impacts.
Right.
That would be being paid for. So,
Okay, what is the arrangement if the second appraisal comes in higher or lower?
you know, that's a great question, and I talked to Larry about that. So basically, the way I understand it, and Larry, you can add in, so he has a real estate department, they need to review the appraisals in their entirety. If it comes in high or low, then we're gonna have to sit down and negotiate.
Yeah, it's not quite. The second appraisal is a review of the first appraisal. And so unless he sees errors, if he sees errors, then they can send it back to the appraisal. But he's reviewing this. This is our standard procedure. We have an appraisal done, and then it's reviewed many times by someone within our own department. In this case, we're having another appraiser review the first appraiser. Now, if he sees errors, then we send it back. But, and he could, but the first appraisal will most likely just redo the work, fixing the errors. Would be how it would work.
So it's not like we have another company out doing another appraisal, we're just confirming the first one.
Yeah,
More or less.
it's slightly different. I mean, he goes through a lot of the same steps because he needs to make sure the math is working and that the rules are followed. So.
You talked a little bit about the method of appraisal that he used, the valuation today, subtraction, what the net worth of the property will be
Right.
after the.
Correct, and I received the appraisal, 85 pages of it. It is still in draft form, so
Right.
I just had time to glance through it. Basically, the process was, there's 3 parcels, 2 on the north, 1 on the south. He appraised the land without the right-of-way strip, so the land parcels in their entirety. Then he appraised the land with the strip gone from the major appraisal. The difference is how he came up with $1.2 million.
The current value
He did with the strip and without the strip, subtracted them and said that's the value of the
of his
strip.
dirt, but there was no, I guess, you start to look at what is that value of that dirt that you're gonna sell, right? That's an appraisal, right? Then you look at the value of the property, based on, for instance, how much we paid for it. Because when we start to look at that, we start to talk about what Mike brought up is the trips.
Right.
So now you're looking at the trips to be worth, and we're taking today's dollars as 700 or 750. I don't remember exactly what mitigation fee is now. But you take that times those trips, and that's a $2.2 million deal. Well, that's a valuation that we've assigned, and that's a revenue evaluation that we've assigned to that property. And so I think some of that, I think that when you go into this review process, I think you need to maybe look at melding some of that together.
I'm not sure that we're able to do that. Our appraisers, we have to make sure that they follow the law.
Well, I'm not asking you I'm not asking you to change the law or to not follow the law. I'm just making sure that when we look at how that was valued, that all the components of the valuation are taken in, not just what we sold dirt for yesterday. I'm just telling you,
Point noted, I'm pretty certain that the value you got is the value you're going to get, and that's the nature of this. We advanced a project, and so the nature of the process sometimes brings in this.
okay, well, I'm just.
But I get your point very much.
So a question that I have, I want to make sure that we answer all questions because when this contract comes back to you, I may not be at the council meeting. So what I'd like to do if possible, and I don't want to put anyone on the spot, but I'd like to go individually and make sure that we've answered individually all of your questions. And I don't care if there's a volunteer to go first, but Councilmember Langford, I'll look at you. Do you have any questions?
I have a few from the things that I've read, and I don't know if you just want the questions concerning what we've covered right now, or do you want to go into the documents that accompany this that I also have questions on?
We can do both.
Okay. RJ, if I was listening correctly, you said that there's a high probability. The high end would be 5.1 million that we'd need to go to if there was the overrun.
If the project went
47%.
over 45% over,
Okay.
that's still just short of what we're asking for in the list.
Right, so we're asking for 4.8. Okay, so if we subtract those two, we're leaving approximately 300,000 that's available in lift.
No.
Okay, can you explain how that's not correct?
The total that is in lift, when these projects are all done, there's identified about 22 $0.6 million worth of projects for all the projects that LIFT is looking to cover. Our portion that we're identifying in item number 12 under the Henry Road project is $5.15 million.
Okay. So, with that said, one of the things that grabbed my attention was on the City of Liberty Lakeside on the first page, Henry Harvard and Henry Road, was additional right-of-way if needed. Excuse me, and then it said South End. Can we expound on this any? I'm not familiar with this at all.
Absolutely. RJ, can you put that map up? So one of the risks we have is we haven't done the design yet. And if you look at the very south end where the Henry Road overpass ties into Country Vista or Appleway, whichever you want to call it, we don't know what that design is going to look like. Therefore, we don't know what, if any, right-of-way is going to be needed. So if there is additional right-of-way needed, then we will have to contact those property owners and negotiate the right-of-way for that improvement. That right-of-way we don't currently own, and it would be an additional cost to the project. And it's a risk right now because we don't know what we need, we don't know if we need it, and we won't until we get into design.
Would that still be considered a credit to us if we had to buy additional right-of-way?
Yes, it would be considered a credit, the right-of-way. However, we would have to follow WashDOT's process in acquiring the right-of-way. So, not that that's a good or bad thing, but when we got the right-of-way from Centennial, it was not done under the process that WashDOT uses to gain right-of-way. So we moved, and in the agreement it says that if we are to get right-of-way, additional right-of-way for this project, we will have to follow WashDOT's process. And it will be a credit.
Just a question that comes up is why under this particular scenario would we have to follow another agency's acquisition?
Because there's state funds involved with this, and so any project, when we have to, but before we advertise for construction, we have to, it's called the certification process. And we have levels of certification. We have to certify that the right-of-way was acquired according to the Uniform Relocation Act or something like that. I can't remember the right name for that, but and so we have to follow that. The fact that you're providing previously obtained right-of-way is actually a gray area, but we're okay with it. It's state funds. But the other part of this is, since this is associated with Interstate 90, there's just a lot of things here, but we have to follow those rules. It's not that big of a deal. It's just that you have to follow the procedures, and we have to certify that it was acquired correctly with our process.
So the intersection design at Henry Road and Country Vista, as the staff said, it's a risk and unknown. What is our risk on that? I mean, somebody must have some type of idea of what they're going to do with that.
There's a lot of different options there. Let me begin by saying that. We walked it out in the field. It's a complicated connection. It's complicated because, one, we're doing a corridor study, and whatever improvement you do there has to work well with the other improvements. Legacy Ridge, the high school, the whole thing, the whole corridor has to work well together. So, it's complicated and there's a lot of options. It can be a roundabout, it could be a traffic signal, it could be a stop sign. Those are kind of the fundamental options that we have. What should it be and what will it be? We need a design professional on board to give us a factual and technical evaluation of that intersection so we can make an informed decision. We have not even begun the design yet. And so it's not that it's complicated, it's just we haven't invested in that design. So it's an unknown, therefore it's a risk. I hope I answered your question, but at this point in time, we don't know what that intersection is going to look like. Nor have we engaged the property owners that own that, whatever right-of-way would be needed, if any would be needed, which I don't know. We have to have a design in order to begin discussions with anybody. And, there was one other thing I wanted to point out, and I'm sorry that we're jumping around a little bit. I just want to make sure that you're aware that when the county commissioners gave us their easement, it was on the condition that there's a span over their right-of-way. Councilmember French had asked that SRTC provide that funding, and they were willing to do that. It complicated the project immensely because those funds were federal, and after much discussion with WashDOT, the county, and ourselves, we've all agreed that it's better for the project for us to use TIF and LIF funds for that 1.5 million to not complicate the whole project with federal requirements. So I forgot to mention that again, but part of this span, which is their right of way, is just around the I-90, south side of I-90. I just wanted to mention that problem has been resolved, but it does trigger use of TIF and LIF funds.
Unless I missed something, on page 2 of the interlocal agreement, it talks about section D, last sentence, talks about capital project system dated 5/3/2019 and included in Exhibit C, as well as GCP 3211 Exhibit B. Just for everybody's notice, I couldn't find Exhibit C. Okay, whether it's relevant or not, I don't know.
So
it just
what?
Didn't show up.
Yeah, and that's good. We changed the exhibit, so now there's only 2 exhibits. There's an Exhibit A and an Exhibit B. So C became B, and B went out.
Thank you. Under page 2 of 8, section 2, funding commitments and payments, 2.2, one of the sentences states that the local agency, which is the city of Liberty Lake, agrees to make payments within 30 calendar days from the receipt of the invoice. How can we make those kinds of commitments when we're talking about refunds, et cetera, from LIF, TIF, which takes months to get?
So we would, at that point, from my understanding, the project construction is until 2021, 2022, we would look to potential short-term financing through Banner Bank or through another financial institution. Until the project was complete, we could get reimbursed for that second part of the construction cost. For the design phase, I believe we have sufficient cash balances to be able to accomplish that and get reimbursed.
It's a cash flow question, right?
Yeah.
It's how do we cover those costs until we get reimbursed? And so you're saying we would need short-term financing for that?
Potentially, yes.
Potentially.
Section 2.3, on page 3, top of, any project savings will be distributed proportionately. Can you explain to me what proportionately means to the investment of each party based on percentage invested?
So we're in for 20.9, you're in for 6, and that's just an easy calculation. That ratio, if we it's around 20%, give or take. But if we save $1 million, then you would get that ratio of 6 million divided by 26.9 as a savings, and we would get the remainder.
So if it was
Just
20%,
simple.
it was $1 million, we'd get 200,000, you would
Right.
get 800,000.
Right, rough numbers.
Rough numbers.
Can you explain to a layman such as myself why it wouldn't just be 100% to the project? Why are we divvying up percentages based upon involvement when the total project is our involvement together?
But yeah, we will not be, it is a total project, you're right. At the very end, the total project, if there's savings, we will divide that up proportionally. So after Barker, after Henry, after Harvard are complete, if there's still money there, let's say $1 million just as a number, then at that point, since you guys were in for 6 million you would get that percentage out of the 26.9, and we would get the remainder there. You would get that savings back. So it is on the total project. Is that, am I answering your question? I'm not sure if I am.
You may be, and I'm just not swift enough to catch on, okay? But what you did do is raise another question to my mind. I'm just gonna state it while it's in the front, is that you said the total project including Barker. And my question would be then, are we being penalized in the form with the reimbursements of savings based upon the outcome of Barker? Which we thought we considered earlier that would have nothing to do with our expenditures.
Well, in the spreadsheet that RJ was showing you, we assume Barker will come in on budget. And that's a pretty safe assumption. So you're actually could be benefiting from Barker because we're fairly competent in that, and if we save that, that would go into the total at the end, and then our amount. So you want Barker to come cheap, right? Because you could actually benefit from that. In the end, if those monies are there. Are you penalized? Not really, because we're not if there's overages, we're not going to charge you for the overages that are associated with Barker.
Just on the savings?
Yeah, if there's savings, you benefit to that ratio, that proportion.
One of my last questions, and thanks for bearing with me, is we say in 3.3, the local agency, including uneconomic remainders. Could staff or WashDOT representative explain that to me?
So an uneconomic remainder means that just let's pretend that we need to buy your house for some type of project in Cavan. If I come in, I'm buying 3/4 of it, and it's worth $2 million for whatever reason. If I'm buying 3/4 of it, you say, well, it's uneconomical. The rest of my property is uneconomical. You're not going to pay me for the 3/4 of it. You're going to pay me for all of that, and that's a right-of-way negotiation that happens. And so, if these properties that need to be acquired have an uneconomical remainder associated with them, then that would be part of the acquisition process that you guys would do, or we would do in that process.
We don't see that happening, so this is kind of template language.
It's boilerplate language, correct.
We don't know that it's relevant to this project. It doesn't appear to be.
Page 4, I believe I'll conclude with this, is that 3.9, it talks about the local agency or the cities. Design must provide for an independent bridge, which will allow for future light rail expansion, etc. Can staff explain to me what is meant by an independent bridge when the whole idea, I thought, was a overpass bridge?
Most likely that section would be deleted. When we first started the agreement process, and there's still actually some discussion about this, but when we first started the agreement process, we wanted that DOT's bridge to be over I-90 and the other part of the bridge to be over this transit property. Al French and Mike Gribner, my boss, had decided later after this that there might be an economy of scale if we actually connect those bridges. And so most likely 3.9 will be, when you are here we will clarify that. It'll either be struck in or there. We need a way to divide up because the county's going to own the part over their right of way. In my mind, if they're connected, that's a problem, but it's not really a problem in my boss's mind, and so they'll be connected. And it'll be fine. That's an agreement that us and the county would enter into.
Just as a smart response, the drivers might find it difficult if it's not connected.
No, it'll be
I
structurally connected.
Yeah, I suppose you're not talking about that.
You have to go real fast to get over that.
This is a ramp, is all it takes.
Thank you both for answering my questions.
Okay, Councilmember Moore?
Thank you. I have a couple of questions. One is this supposed to be a fair market value appraisal? And is it the fair market value of the property as it exists with existing zoning and land uses? Or is it fair market value as used as right of way?
So I'm not an appraiser, well, I'll do my best. The appraisers are tasked with acquiring land for the highest and best use for that land. And that's how they look at that. So whatever, and zoning comes into that, surrounding, and obviously, and then, comparable sales comes into that for the land around that. And I don't know if you had a chance to look at that, obviously you're welcome to.
I haven't seen it, no.
We just got it today, or she just got it.
I got it today, and we want to get, well, if we have to negotiate with WashDOT on the 2 appraisals, if there's a divergence, we were going to continue to work on that and then provide it to you. But I will say this, when I was looking through all the requirements that WashDOT had added in this, I started looking through all the RCWs and acquisition. I'll tell you, acquiring right-of-way in WashDOT's requirement is a career. The rules are as long as my arm. I mean, it went on and on and on. It's very, very complicated. The individual that did the first appraisal, he used to work for WashDOT, but he is certified and has all these credentials. The second guy that's reviewing the first guy has as many credentials as the first guy. So it's very complicated, but I think it's best and fair, current use, best use.
I always go with highest and best use, but the current use plays into that, and what that highest and best use is. What it comes down to what the fair market value is. So.
Okay.
So we're not appraisers, Councilman anymore, so we're doing the best we can to answer that.
I'm not either, just trying to understand. Thank you. I have another question. RJ, do you feel comfortable with your cash flow projections?
Yes, we know we're 2 or 3 years out, yes.
Okay. If that's the case, do we have a line of credit agreement with Banner Bank?
We have not established one yet. I have talked to them about it.
Well, I think that's something we probably should do. It would eliminate one of the risks that are involved, I think, in the project. Secondly, this does not include an ecological or geological survey of the property, correct? We have not conducted an ecological or geological survey on any of the property.
That is correct. That will be the responsibility of the design engineering firm. They need to do all.
So that's another, all I'm pointing out is that's another unknown risk in the project. Is that correct?
It is, because we've walked it, we've talked to the utilities, we have educated opinion of what's out there based on the utilities that have gone in, based on walking it and knowing that it's been agricultural land for 100 years. And so as far as there being, rock or something like that, I don't, I guess. What concerns me more in a construction environment is if it's already been developed and there's foundations and false work and all that. This is kind of virgin land, and do you have concerns ecologically?
Yeah, go through a NEPA process, and I don't have any known concerns. We're not digging much at all here, except for the foundation for the bridge. That part is in a pretty known area because we already built I-90, but we will go through all the due diligence that we normally would to get the environmental and all that those things established.
Okay, very good, thank you.
My question was asked.
Okay.
Just a couple follow-ups.
I have a question, I'm sorry. If we have to pay finance charge for the line of credit, RJ, is that reimbursable from the TIF and LIF?
You just told my question.
Oh, I'm just curious. Is it reimbursable the cost of the line of credit?
Yes.
I'm sorry.
Yes.
Okay, all right. No, that's okay. So that was one. And the other one, just sort of since it's been my thing lately. So obviously there's going to be changes to what we're reviewing tonight between now and when we see the final one. Can we get a red line version and the clean copy when we review it next time, so we can see what changed? Like section 3.9 that might go away and things like that.
Okay, so we'll show them side by side.
Yeah, one red line and then one clean, so we can see the changes, that'd be great, thanks. I think everything else has already been asked.
Thank you guys, you asked a lot of good questions. My one question is 150 grand enough for landscaping?
We don't know yet.
Do
So,
we have a educated estimate there, or is landscaping going to wind up being $1 million? I guess that's what I'm.
no, it's a great question. So let me share with you our thinking. We don't think, there's not gonna be landscaping over the bridge, okay? So the approaches are probably gonna be about 600 feet on each side as you come off of the Mission or you come off of Country Vista. There's about 600 feet before you start into the elevation, okay? So about 600 feet on the south side, 600 feet on the north side. Their landscape design template is a little bit different than ours. So they gave us what they would have spent, which was eligible for the project. If we want more, it will be on our nickel, and those costs would be ours. They would not be part of this agreement. So if we wanted more trees, more shrubs, more whatever, then the credit of $150,000 is only what WashDOT would have spent on this project had they been designing it. So they gave us their $150,000, and if we want more landscaping than that, it will be on us.
That answers my question. One quick follow-up, has Jen looked at it? Does she?
No, but, right, we have started to identify landscape designs that we like because of maintenance and growth and all those things that we know about. The other thing is we don't know about the roundabout, so we all know that the roundabouts that we design kind of look a certain way. And I don't know that this would deviate from any of that, but generally it's brick, dirt, and a few trees and some grasses, and it doesn't seem to be overly expensive, but it's relative. And we haven't designed those roundabouts yet, so it's hard to say. So let me be very clear, the $150,000 is just a credit from them. If we want more than $150,000 worth of landscaping, it will be on the city.
Thank you.
Good. Thank you. It's a very good question so far. On it, I just want to start off by saying is that ever since we started this, I've been on notice, I've been put on notice many, many times. I'm really in favor of this. And everything I try to look at is that how can I help to move this thing forward and not ask questions of why it shouldn't go forward. So please keep that in mind when I have these questions. One of them just keeps reoccurring to me is a $6 million credit. If we have a valuation or appraisal of $1.2 million, and yet it's going to cost us in revenue we're not going to receive in the future, roughly 2.2 or 2.3. As a layman, it hits me is that that should be maybe considered as part of that $6 million that we're putting out. Because the $1.2 million valuation is that we are paying $2.2 or $2.3 million for that. So that's just a concern to me as a layman. Can that be addressed any better to put me at ease? Because realize, I'm in the position where I want to try to understand this as much as I can so I can explain to the citizens when they come to me down the road and go, how did you vote for this and it was so far over? Or we should have had this done. Why didn't you ask these questions? That's what I'm trying to ask here.
Katie, can I make just on the mitigation fee portion, that's a voluntary mitigation fee, so as we say $2.2 million, that's not a hard factual number, because they could do a traffic study, and a traffic study could show you if you do anything, or they'll do the minimum requirement. So taking a $2.2 million versus a $1.2 million, the $2.2 million is not justified enough to state that.
For me, I don't really care at this point. I mean, I don't want to make so much of an emphasis. If it's 2.2 or 2.3, it can be 500,000 for all I'm concerned. If it's 500,000, that's what we're paying for that. We're not getting a valuation of 1.2 land for nothing. There's a cost to it. And the cost is future revenue we're not going to receive. It might be 250,000 or 500,000, but that's still a cost that we're not going to get.
There's another thought process with it too to look at is you're getting $1.2 million now, but you're making the traffic improvements now that benefit that area and the traffic flow. So you're getting it, you're building it pretty ahead of time. So while maybe you're not collecting it, you're building the infrastructure that you would have collected to build infrastructure later.
It's a difficult question because it's come up many, many times, and I don't think we've ever really had a strong answer for it. I think that there's individuals that look at this and go, you know, whatever. whatever the dollar amount should be, that should be what the credit is towards the 6 million. So I don't want to drag that on anymore. That's just a concern that I have.
You know, I understand it. Let me draw a distinction though. When we negotiated with the Centennials over the acquisition of that right of way, that was what we negotiated. It was
Right.
2,300 trips for a certain number of years. Remember, when we get those dollars, it's not free money for us. We have to spend it within 5 years or return it, and it can only be spent on specific projects.
Right.
And so this project is not identified as a Harvard Road mitigation eligible project. Not that that matters, but then when we turned around and negotiated with WashDOT over the terms and conditions that you see here, the trips that we gave credit to for this, for the transaction, did not enter into our negotiations with WashDOT. So I know there's a connection in our mind because that right-of-way and the credit that we're getting, there's a physical connection, but when we negotiated them, they were two separate transactions. That's not a good answer, but...
Well, no, it's not a bad answer. I think the important is, at least it's an answer, and I think for the citizens, and even us can look at it, is that we're doing everything we can to try to get the answers so we can move forward. Because there's a lot of variables here that this council is going to vote on, that we're obligating the city, that we're not going to know for 2 to 3 years down the road. So having said that, I just got a couple others because the other council have been able to pick up some of these.
Mike, can I interject something?
Absolutely.
Can you also address the issue too that, and maybe Larry can as well, that there is some cost savings associated with the city acquiring the property beforehand as far as timing of having to acquire that right away under the WashDOT process, as well as potentially costs associated with doing it the way we did it, the way the city did it before, unless you had to do it the other way.
So, thank you, Sean. So our agreement with WashDOT was we would have the right-of-way before July 1st.
Right.
And there was what's July 1st is the beginning of your biennium. And me having that property, the city of Liberty Lake having that property before July 1st helped us to use that property as a credit for this transaction. Had we not had the property by July 1st, then I would have had to follow all of the federal hurdles to acquire the property, which would have taken us longer and could have impacted the project. But thank you, Sean. So we were motivated to get it before July 1st. Had we not done it, we would have had to follow a different process.
Right. Thanks, Sean, for interjecting that. I think that's important. Once again, not to belay this, is that there is a cost to that.
Yes, sir.
Okay, there is just a cost.
Can I interject?
Sure.
Just one thought, Mike, is that, you know, the development on the trips are based on development. No development, no trips. And so when you're allocating trips to a project, now you're getting development within that area. And so that's part of the key of making the project really valuable, because now we've kind of primed the pump with trips to create building development, retail sales, which continues to flow into the lift funds for another 15 years.
Do I understand? Thank you. If I can go on, is it on page 3 of 3.2? No, I'm sorry. Page 2, F. It says the parties agree to meet monthly to review all records, invoices, upcoming expenses, and other related materials for the project. That was from the start. We requested that from the council standpoint. We wanted to be involved in that on a monthly basis. What I'm not comfortable with is this. This meeting may take place on a less frequent basis if mutually agreed upon by both parties. If that is going to be by both parties, for me, that is council makes that decision. Because council, as we move forward, is the ones that have to make sure that we're going to pay for this, how we're going to pay for it. What I don't want to do is for the council to be involved enough to get the decision, and then later on, we'll let you kind of know what the expenses are as we move along. If we're going to have more landscaping or some costs down the road, I think it's important for the council, at least me, that on a monthly basis, we have a report where we are. I don't want to suddenly get into where, well, it's not that important this month, we'll let you know next month. Now, if the council has any difference in that, please interject.
I actually have a question. So, under what hypothetical scenario, would those meetings not take place that frequently?
If there's no bills. So it's not DOT's intent to come and report to the council monthly. We will report to staff. We will work together. Here's the bill for the month. And if you see a discrepancy, we will resolve those, and then Katie or whoever you guys deem will come and talk with you about
Yeah, that information, and my point is, it has to come to council as far as I'm concerned.
So the goal here is that there's no surprises, and so these monthly meetings are for us to track costs and are these projects coming in within budget or not. So there's no, so hey, we're trending high, we're trending low, we're trending on budget. That's the goal of this. I think that all of the transactions, correct me if I'm wrong, RJ, all of the payments from the city to DOT require council approval.
Correct. Yeah, they would all come to city council
So,
for review.
whatever-
Those don't start triggering until the Henry Road project as well.
Right. Part of my reasoning there is that if we're on top of this each month, if we start getting down the road and we start realizing, you know what, we're gonna have some added costs on the north side because of ABC, whatever it is. I don't wanna wait until it's sprung on, that's the wrong terminology. It comes at the last minute, as, oh, we need to X number of dollars, and here's the challenge. I like to know if it's sort of coming up, so it's not a surprise for us.
So
That's
my
all.
suggestion is, if this language is okay with us, Councilmember Kennedy, what I'm thinking is, the city would provide monthly updates to the council on a whatever basis, RJ, that's something you can do.
Yeah, no, we could report back to
But
council.
WashDOT isn't gonna come and give you an update every
No.
month. Okay.
No, I'm not expecting that at all.
You mind if I move back up to your previous question about the credit as far as the property and the delta between what the appraised value is and your future mitigation fees or whatever that rate. So in the process, if we were doing this post July 1st, okay, the DOT would have taken control of the acquisition process on this. We would have put a right-of-way map out, we would have assigned it a parcel number, we would have went through appraisal and negotiations and all of that. And then we would have paid the bill. Okay, and then the city of Liberty Lake would be on the hook, so for lack of a better way to say that, for the entire $6 million. So the benefit to the city was that they were able to use their tools that you use with your mitigation to not have to pay $6 million. And that's why the city asked us, could we go get this in the way that you guys with your tools can do that, and can that be a credit towards the $6 million? If it was the other way around, we would have acquired it and you would be paying the entire $6 million rather than the credit that RJ was saying. So that's the benefit to you if you need to explain that. That you're actually, I get it that there's a delta in the values, but as far as the cash out, there was a lot of concern last spring about what, that $6 million. And that's kind of the genesis, from my viewpoint, of how that happened.
I do recall those conversations and stuff. And once again, when I say a figure, if it comes out to be 2.3, whatever it is, I know that they have a certain period of time that they have to use that up. So the likelihood of it actually ever being that number is probably not even logical. But that's why I wanted to adjust it when I said earlier, it could be 500,000 or 250. So I think I've talked enough about that.
But I'd like to add one other thing. When I was talking to Larry before July 1st about us doing the work and getting it right away, and the value it would bring to the property, was Larry said his process would have taken a year just to get the right of way. And that's why time is money, as we all know. We would have been held off a year just in acquiring the right of way had we followed their process.
Oh, I understand that completely. I understood it as we were going through it. I understand it today. I just want to make sure that the dollar amount is there, that if we can say here or there, it can be a lot. Can I go on?
Sure. Oh yeah, I just wanted to make sure that's.
I think the last one I had was on page 4, on 3.7, local agency will enter into the maintenance agreement. Clarify something for me, I'm a little confused here. It's my understanding that we would have the responsibility for everything up to the bridge until it crosses I-90. And that everything over I-90 this is from previous meetings, is the responsibility of DOT. If somebody runs into it, a truck or something like that, we're not gonna have to have any responsibility. Because we were asked at one time, do we want to do that? That's correct?
That's pretty close. We
Oh,
would.
pretty close?
Yeah.
I want more than close.
Yeah, well, let me explain. We would own the bridge and the structural components of the bridge. Just like you owned Harvard recently, we still own Harvard, but you, the city, paid it. So the maintenance and the, plowing and that stuff over I-90, that'll be something that in this agreement that you guys can do.
But if it gets run into, a truck hits it.
Oh yeah, that's ours. That is ours, right?
Okay, so I guess, should there be more clarification here, or am I missing it somewhere else?
So the maintenance agreement that we have with DOT comes back to the council for approval, and we haven't begun, that was one of my very first sheets, we haven't begun putting that together. But in essence, we operate and maintain the structure, the entire roadway, from the north end to the south end. They own the structure.
Right, but what I'm reading here, and once again, it might be just a simple clarification for me, and I appreciate the patience. It says Spokane County for the Henry Road Bridge to access and maintain the structure.
Which
Structure to
number
me
are you on?
is everything, including what goes over 90.
What number are you on?
3.7 on page 4 of 8. Has obtained a non-inclusive agreement, blah, 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 with Spokane County for Henry Road Bridge to access and maintain the structure, and a nice word, including but not limited to the approach, slabs, and walls. I just want to make sure that I'm comfortable with, as I understand, is that the bridge itself, we're going to maintain the road. It has to be resealed or something like that, and the snow plow. But if somebody runs into that, the city of Liberty Lake is not responsible.
That's correct.
Okay.
And it's the washout
reflect that,
span and the county span. The county span is owned by the county, washout span is owned by washout.
Should that be just wordsmithing then, Larry?
It will be reflected in that other agreement.
Okay, very good. Thank you. I think that's it. A couple others, but we covered that. Very good, thank you.
May I redo it, Carl? I have two more questions. One on this page, designed as WashDOT. It may be something that just simply escapes me, but when we look at the totals, Harvard Bridge widening, 4.5, Harvard on-ramp 4, Henry Road 14.5, that all comes out to 23 million. We keep talking about anything over 20.6 million, 20.9 million that we're responsible for. Where did this 23 million come in?
I kind of need to see that, but some monies have already been expended for the design, and that will get us up to the 26.9.
When you add the 3.9 into that, which is number 3 Barker Northside ramp, 3.9 brings up to 26.9.
The Barker is the one.
If you add 1,
Oh, yeah.
2, and 4, it's,
Yeah, you add it up, it comes to
It's
26.9.
8.5.
Not the 3.9, it's 23 million.
That's correct. It's just Barker.
Thank you. The last question I have is directed more to the city and to staff. One thing that I guess I haven't heard yet, and I haven't heard asked, and we're talking about a lot of different numbers that we may or may not have to pay. We have some known costs, etc. Whether the project's worthy or not is not the discussion. But I think that it's important that we establish at some point, whether it's tonight or at another date before this transaction takes place, is do we have an economic impact statement that says this is costing us X, but what we hope to bring into the future, north side, south side, whatever, we're expecting a return of blank from the economic development of this. Do we have any such instrument that we can point to and say, this is gonna be worth the expenditures, including all the unknowns.
My answer, I'm gonna answer that if I can, is in the lift agreement, the lift policies. So, in lift, in the beginning, we anticipated that just Henry Road alone would cost $16 million as part of a project cost, and parks and the development. And so there was a kind of a development understanding that we would develop over time. We would put in about $25 million of cash from retail sales tax, growth, etc. And also the state would put in 25 million. I think it's about right. It's a million type thing over 25 years. And so I think that's where a lot of that benefit analysis might come in, you know, in what was anticipated back in the creation of LIFT. And then on top of that, we've had a history of seeing where that has transpired over the last 10 years, 6 years, 8 years, whatever it is. And so you've seen this constant, you know, the 2 million coming in from the state, our match from the TIF money, and also the city's retail sales tax revenue over there. I think that's kind of where that question could be answered.
So there's not a new valuation.
So if you want
There's
to,
not one that we can point to and say, hey, we
if
expect
we've done it,
$25 million
we have
return.
not done a return on investment.
Is that even something that we should be considering on a project like this,
It's
or not so much?
You know, I don't want to use a bunch of anecdotal information, but my observation, building this Henry Road overpass will, the value and the public safety, to our police, to our fire, to our schools, to ourselves. And we had a very short shutdown, midday from 10 to 2, and this city went into meltdown with the congestion that was created. Not having that redundancy of a means to get from one side of our city to the other is problematic. So there's just the convenience of it. I don't know how to put a price tag on that, but there is. There also, because of this going in, I hear anecdotally, and you guys might too, that this is valuable to the growth and development of our community, from construction to businesses to housing, all of that. So quality of life, redundancy in our transportation, and potentially more development that could occur because of this overpass. I don't know how to quantify that. I'm not an economic development person, but certainly if the council wanted us to hire someone to do a return on investment or an assessment, we could, but I only have this anecdotal information. I don't have facts.
Thank you.
I think that's a really good question. For my own sake, when I've tried to look at something like this, is there an economic value to that? Yes, there is. And in all honesty, in my mind, I tell it, this is intrinsic value. Intrinsic value is that there's great value there that we really necessarily don't get a dollar amount back. It's convenience for our citizens. It's a safety feature, things that you talk about. You know, look what happened when electricity went off the other day. This town came to a stop. You know, so when it comes to valuation, that word intrinsic is always in my mind. Is that there's a valuation there that I have to give. That there's also a benefit tied to it.
Any other questions? Comments?
So I want to ask Larry, I know the Attorney General is reviewing the recitals. Those are being developed. There's a little bit of wordsmithing that's going to go on in here. Do you have any sense or estimate of when they would have their review complete?
I'm hoping 3 or 4 weeks. That's what I'm pushing.
So when it's done, we'll send it to you, put it on the agenda, and so it could be 3 or 4 weeks. So it'd be around Thanksgiving-ish.
Yeah, I don't want to overpromise.
Is there anything from WashDOT that you could tell us about the impact of the new license fee? Whether or not that'll impact this project?
There's nothing that I could tell you on that.
we are watching like everybody else. At that point, it's a legislative question on how they will react to it, and there is in the Office of Financial Management on their website, there is a economic analysis. It's about a 1 or 2 page document that you can go and look at that. But right now there is, I don't have anything. Okay.
And I'd like to present something for the council and mayor to consider, is that if it does pass, and it's going to take months before we know for sure that the funding has an impact on this project, I'd like council to consider moving forward with a design consultant agreement, because if we do invest the $850,000 in the design, and we can pursue other funding. So getting that design done, reimbursed through CHIP and LIP, has huge value to our community. So something to think about. Even if the funding is unknown after the election, if it were to pass, you might consider still investing the $850,000 in the design so we could keep this project moving while they figure out whether or not we lost funding. Because if we did lose funding from the Connect Washington funds, we could still pursue other funding and we'd be ready to go because we'd have a design. That adds value when you start competing. So we may be asking you to approve the design agreement if 976 were to pass. We still may be asking you to consider approving the design contract.
Okay. This kind of concludes this workshop here for this. What I would like to ask is if there, I see Joe Tortorella here from Washington Roads. Any comments that people may have that on this discussion, what you've heard?
Well, there is methodology for determining economic impact to everything from investment, private sector investment, tax base and everything else. I don't know enough about the project that to even give you even a start evaluation of that. The survey was recently done, just this last week, showed that the 976 was failing at 51%, but we won't know until the west side votes. It's really out of our hands, even though I think it probably won't pass here in Eastern Washington, because I think we've gotten the message out well enough.
Okay. Any other comments maybe before we move on? Okay, we'll move on and this citizen comments. Resolutions?
I gotta read that, don't I?
You gotta read that resolution. There's a test.
Resolution number 12-164E, City of Liberty Lake, Spokane, County, Washington. Resolution of the City Council of the City of Liberty Lake, Spokane County, Washington, approving certain public improvements and public improvement costs and providing for other matters properly related thereto.
Okay.
Move resolution number 12-164E.
Second.
Moving to second. Discussion.
Yes. I don't recall, have we discussed this in the past specifically? If so, my memory has failed me. Has this come to us before we've had some discussion on this?
We're adding the project to the list.
So there's two aspects of this resolution. One is outlining more, so what we changed in the past was Henry Road, or the I-90 project was in there for $26 million, because at that time we didn't know more than that. Now that we have more definition, we're changing the Henry Road, the project to be the Henry Road overpass, $150,000 for design as a separate item, and then the rest of the construction of Henry Road. And then Spokane County has their portion of $1.5 million. The other one that Greenstone has requested to ask is Wellington Road.
Yeah, it says Wellington and Harvard Road. Harvard Road is also proposed to be added.
Correct. So that was discussed as a project from other developers within the capital facilities plan and transportation.
But it hasn't been discussed here.
Yeah.
Because what I'm being asked to vote on this tonight And I'm not comfortable with it because I don't know. Did I miss something? Am I the only one?
Well, the Wellington and Harvard, like you said, was on the capital facilities plan that we looked at.
Correct.
And marked as possibly being funded through this mechanism, correct?
Correct.
So,
For this context, it's a great question. It is complicated. Every year, our council does approve a resolution related to the TIF and LIF projects that are eligible. We then provide that to the county. When you approve so we didn't talk about everything on this list because I think part of it's already on the resolution. What we've done is change the resolution to include Wellington, Harvard, and, Henry Road.
Henry Road project from Mission to Appleway. So that used to be called the I-90 project. We're calling that now the Henry Road project.
So in the original document, there was a reference to this. We've changed it to update the wording. Mike Grivner insists that we have a funding mechanism in place, which is this, before we can execute the agreement. You don't have to approve the resolution tonight. We can do it when the agreement comes forward. When we put this meeting together, because of public noticing or legal requirements, we put the resolution and the contract together. The contract's not ready.
So we don't need to vote on this tonight?
You don't have to vote on it tonight. It's just one less thing to do.
Okay. I'm comfortable with that because it gives me, for me, time to look at this and study a little more.
Mike, remember too, that the resolution is just a project list. It's not a funding mechanism that there's an outlay of funds. It's just that you're eligible for funding. You need to have it on the project list.
Some of my concern though is that, Shelley, in the past is that where questions have come up and I hear from individuals come back and say, well, Mike, you guys discussed this, council discussed it, why are you even questioning this?
Understood.
The project list is $22,600,000, so I'd like to have another couple of weeks to look at it.
I'll throw out, this is only for adding these projects, but the rest of the list remains the same. This is really a housekeeping item. I don't think that this needs to be further kicked down the road. I think we can vote on it tonight.
In regard to that, anybody else? In regard to that, would you take just a moment, please, and just go through the list real quickly, and all I'm asking you to do is identify the additions that are here tonight that weren't here yesterday.
So, number 10, Wellington Harvard Roundabout.
Okay.
And then number 12, Henry Road project from Mission to Appleway.
Okay. And that's the only changes?
The only change.
So can you just help me understand something? We're talking about Henry Road project, and I think we've narrowly defined it. What about the widening of Harvard, the intersections onto I-90?
Those are not eligible for TIF and LIF funds. They fall outside the boundary. Harvard Road project south of Country Vista and east of the Henry Road overpass are outside the TIF and LIF boundaries. They're not eligible. The projects in the TIF and LIF have to be within the boundary.
Yeah.
Henry Road is in the boundary. Harvard is not.
And the extensions onto the I-90 are not either?
Okay, put up my map again, RJ.
I just had it in my mind that
So see the red line, anything east of that and south of Country Vista are not in the TIF boundary. I'm gonna point that out. And on the north side, I'm only talking on the south side of I-90.
yeah, I'm talking on the north side where Harvard dumps onto the I-90. We have two extensions going into work there. Got one coming from the north-south and then the one going from south on.
So the construction for the Harvard roads, that's being constructed by WashDOT, not by the city.
So just so that we're very clear, the reason why we want the Henry Road on the list is so it's reimbursable. Harvard Road is not reimbursable, and that's why we've asked WashDOT to bill us our $6 million on the Henry Road overpass. so we can be reimbursed. Harvard Road is outside the boundary and will not be reimbursable through TIF, and that's why you're carrying the construction costs on that.
Connecting Washington, basically.
Excuse me, Connecting Washington is paying for that.
Thanks, we have some time to discuss this. One question I do have is item number 7, we had a Mission Roundabout listed at 600,000. And I suppose that was in, what, 2018, 19?
I believe that was last time.
And we're thinking 750 for the next one? Number 10?
Yeah.
Thank you so much, appreciate it.
Question.
Mike?
Did I understand correctly, RJ, you said 10 and 11 has been recently added?
10 and 12.
10 and 12, thank you, okay. So at 10, we're looking at 750,000. 12, we are, what is that?
That adds up about 7.5 million.
7.5 million. So we're about $8 million that we're talking about. I don't think that's a can that we've already kicked down the road. No,
I would advocate the one before this, that number 12 was more like $26 million, so.
The cost actually came down because we redefined 12 to reflect the project that we have today, not the project that was anticipated in 2009. So it's actually significantly less. And the 6.5, just so you know, 6 is from us, 1.5 is from the county, because they're going to front the 1.5 million for their overpass to be reimbursed from TIF and LAC.
RJ, with regard to item number 12, as everyone can tell, this is resolution E as in Edward. Number 12 is already there. You've just renamed it and updated the figures to come down, correct? Okay.
So the only dollar figure that was added was the roundabout at Harvard and Wellington.
Correct. It's in our capital facilities.
It's in the capital facilities plan. So, pretty simple. Any further discussions?
Is there, at this point, just so we're clear, there's a motion on the table to vote. If there's one to move it to another meeting, then we'd have to have a separate motion to do that. So just so we're clear on the understanding.
I just have one quick question. Mayor, do you remember, or staff, do you remember the date that number 10 was on the list to be paid? What year that was to be paid from? I know it appears on the capital facility plan, but do we recall the date that was going to be reimbursed?
I think it's 21. It's scheduled for 21-22, right?
This is, so everyone knows, Wellington is the main entrance into Chutina. It's not, I don't have a year. It's either the next year or the following year.
Yeah, it was either 20 or 21, I can't remember which.
They're not going to do it next year. It's 20.
It's just 21 and 22 on the
If you have the capital facility.
list.
Yeah, Greenstone's plan is not 20. They're going to do light for Indiana, I think. So this would be a 21-22 project. So 3 years.
Councilmember Moore has the date.
That's what it says, 21, 22.
Yeah, that sounds right.
Thank you so much.
So, Sean, our proposal, what we need to do if we want to extend this for another 2 weeks to look at it.
Someone would need to make a motion to continue the resolution to another date.
I would make a motion that we extend it to another date, simply because we've had at least 2 council members think about it, and then let's leave it to the majority to see where we want to go with that. I go along with the majority.
If we need multiple council members to assess something, then I say they get the time to assess it appropriately.
So you're seconding his motion?
I would suggest then, if to do that, let's not do it for the next meeting, let's do it for the meeting after that, so that Katie will be back.
So November 5th is a meeting, and then November 19th. So we will put on the agenda for November 19th, and perhaps we'll have the agreement with WashDOT.
Did I finish the motion?
No, correct, I'm just, as far as the date's certain for it, so we would need to vote on that first.
Motion to move it
To the 19th, right, to table it to the 19th.
There's a second.
Correct.
Further discussion, not hearing any on that motion to move to the 19th, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, there you go.
Nay.
Now, we're at citizen comments. It's a great place to be. Citizens, get up and walk out there. Any comments? Lots of discussion. Not hearing any comments, we're going to move forward. Right?
Yep.
Thank you. Yeah, I forgot about that right away.